Hello and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a conversation with a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. My name is Megan Rounds and welcome to today's show. Today's guest joined the Lightworkers Lab around the same time as I did back in November of 2016. I had to double check because I didn't realize it had been that long that I'd been a part of the lab until I noticed this person's start date. And I'm like, hey, that sounds familiar. She's an intuitive medium channel, animal communicator, energy healer, and teacher. She's also a moderator and can be primarily found here in the main lab or teaching programs such as the Intuitive Intensive. She resides with Brian, her husband of 15 years, in Burbank, California, and their meeting was wildly synchronistic, which I hope we'll get to hear more of in today's conversation. Hint, hint. Together they care for 4 cats, Barnabas and Franzi, who are both 7.5 years old, Con, who's 7, and Delilah, who's 6, as well as 4 parakeets, Raphael, Anu, Orion, Yael, each who are approximately 1.5 years old. She hosts, she still hosts it, hosts a live broadcasted podcast and online TV talk show called Charmed Life that takes place every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time and focuses on spirituality, wellness, metaphysics, magic, Gaia love, and the unconditional love of the universe. She also co-hosts a second podcast with Aiden Demarest called Enlightened AF, which is a comedy that features spiritual topics from a relaxed perspective. In her youth and early adulthood, she was an actor and also studied classical vocal performance with a choral emphasis for over 20 years. Today, she is self-employed, offering one-on-one sessions for humans and animals, along with online and in-person teaching and live and on-demand programs within the Lightworkers Lab. She is also close to becoming a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and I, for one, am really excited to see how she incorporates that into her work. Please give a warm Lightworkers welcome to the fabulous Tricia Carr. All right, it worked.
Yeah. Hi there.
Hey, hello. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to speak with me and with us today. And I love that we get to hear your birds in the background. That's super cool.
I hope they're not too much.
Not at all.
Okay.
No, to me, it's kind of like you have, the outdoors within, because you have the sounds of outdoors in your place. That's pretty cool. I find it really relaxing.
Oh, good. I actually tried to ask them to be quiet, but they started right before we got going. I think it was all those stories that you read about Willie Nelson and the other animals. They got excited.
Yep. I had some others lined up for today, and I'm like, I can't read those. I mean, they were cool stories, but I'm like, I have to go the animal route for sure, because it's you, and you are an animal communicator, and I know you to do a number of different things, but that's the one that resonates. Well, actually, they all really resonate a lot with me, but the animal thing just stands out. So, and I didn't realize. I would love to hear. Okay, now I want to ask you 15 questions before I ask one. I want to ask you how cats and birds get along in your household. Having had a couple of cats myself, I'm not sure how that would have worked with ours. One certainly liked birds, but not for the reasons we would want to share on the show.
Yeah. Right. Well, they're all individuals. And so when I first started having a household with cats and birds as an adult, because as a child we had birds. Oh my goodness, Con's super excited now too. Everybody's going to join in. Sorry. That's
Excellent.
how it is.
That's super cool.
So yes, as an adult, I first had my cat Aramis, and then the person that I was with at the time, dating or whatever you want to call it, he got me a cockatiel, and so I hadn't had these were the first animals I had as an adult period. And I was like 23 years old between that age. And so I just didn't trust him. And then I learned that the cockatiel really couldn't be on her own in the similar way that dogs can't be on their own, because they're grouping animals. So, she and I bonded, me and the cockatiel. And then I got her a parakeet companion, so it wasn't too similar so as to block me out of the relationship, becoming an actual sexual mating pair. And I just kept them separate for 8 years. My cat was young still, but by somehow, I don't remember how I segued into it, but I just discovered that my cat had become desensitized to them, so much so that I could put the birds on his back and he would be like, ooh, that feels good. Their little nails feel good on my back. And then I could just leave them open air. Now that was them. And now I have 4 cats who live inside the home. I have 2 that actually live outside the home too, 6 altogether. And in here, so I do have them in a kind of enclosure that is impenetrable. It's it's got glass around it. So that actually, so everyone knows, people have different opinions about it. It actually feels secure to them. I have on top of their enclosure too a bamboo covering so that it feels like they're inside a tree. So that's how they spend most of their time. Even if they were in nature, they would be in a smaller area hopping back and forth. And then when they get to stretch their wings, the cats are just not in the room, just to be safe. But Con, who spends most of his time with him here, he's desensitized to them. But I still don't trust him to be open air with them yet.
Yeah.
And then I've got a little vampire murderer that he just absolutely just never, no. He's never going to be desensitized.
Yep. I think that one of my cats was like that. She was more of an outdoor cat. She was very, very... she loved people, very social, would go, all of our neighbors knew who she was. Many of them wanted to hire her because she was also a mouser and just amazingly good at it. And that's where we have a dog now who's a bird dog. Anytime she hears birds, she's like on alert. She's a Weimaraner and has a basic hunting instinct that we don't hunt, but she's interested, I think, at least in getting to know them better. So I've just always been curious about that. And I think that desensitization is a really interesting and powerful concept. I'm thinking the other dog we have who's part Weimaraner but part lab probably could care less if there's a cat or a bird or anything else in the house. It's the other dog. It's like personality is very different in that way.
Well, I mean, but labs are retrievers too, so it's just it's individual. Yeah, there is this sort of inbreeding. There's the breeding that is in there. They're responding to that kind of conditioning. That's it's the energy of the lineage that they're responding to. But you could still get probably a Weimaraner who would be not care. It's still personality oriented, but that's how it is. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's it's kind of the same with people. But
exactly.
Well, Tricia, what I typically like to do for people who make their first appearance on the show is ask a very general, broad question. And it could very easily take the rest of our time, and that's okay. I may have some follow-up questions along the way that will take us in different directions. But the big general question is your spiritual journey. It's what has been your spiritual journey that had gotten you to this point, as well as how you became introduced to the Lightworkers Lab.
Okay, well, the spiritual journey, it probably, as a child, I was a seeker, and I actually took myself to church. My family didn't go to church, but I took myself to church, and I hitched a ride when I was very young, like 10, 11 years old, with close, my best friend or something like that, and their family. And that was the only paradigm that I knew to see. I mean, I didn't know I was a spiritual seeker. I was, of course, a 10-year-old doesn't have that language. And so when I was 11, I actually had my first extremely metaphysical experience, extremely like an awakening. It was really very much like Kundalini. Of course, I didn't have that language when I was 11.
Holy cow.
And it was through traditional Baptist Christian baptism. I was baptized of my own choosing. And as I went down into the water, I felt a column of light just rush through my body. And I saw it and I felt it, and it rushed through my entire being, my body too, my being. And that was not, I mean, no one told me to expect that. It was very traditional, very not a charismatic church in any way, not a, Gifts of the Spirit church or Assembly of God. It was Baptist, very dry, with hymnals. And I went down to the water, came up, that happened, and I came up shaking and like this ecstasy. And the pastor, whomever was baptizing me, was just kind of like, okay, honey, like it's just assuming that maybe I'd gotten afraid. Well, I guess I was a small child as I was dunked, and everything. It was kind of comforting me. And this was a service that my mother did come to with me because she recognized my sincerity and wanted to bear witness. So she was out there, and I turned and looked at her, and I just remember she was like crying because she's very empathic. Of course, not that, have those words. She could feel it, and she didn't, and it was eliciting something in her too, as I really, bring that moment here. So my mother had been raised really terrifying at fire and brimstone. And so she was always terrified of the subject because it immediately for her meant confronting what she had been told her whole life was, you're definitely just going to hell. I mean, you just are. I mean, you're 9, you said a naughty word, so you're going to hell. You know what I mean? Like that's basically how she lived. So that was my first really profound spiritual experience. And then I continued to just study and pray. And then I did get into like charismatic churches. So I would pray in tongues or speak in tongues. And so again, like eliciting a very demonstrative kind of spiritual expression. I had mediumistic experiences when I was a teenager where I would experience someone sitting on my bed, and I would be like, that's Jesus. You know what I mean? Like that was the framework I had to put on top of it. And then about age 20, I think it was, the church paradigm, I was actually in a school to become a minister, and just what they were teaching, the dogma was just not aligning with what I felt my relationship with the universe or with God or with Jesus to be. And so I just had to leave confused. Even I was confused, but because I didn't know what it meant to leave, and just took ownership of it myself. And then I actually started deciding to explore in other ways, again, not even realizing this was all sewn together, that this is one tapestry. At some point, I mean, actually a big part of it was my running practice, because I had a lot of healing to do, having been in a deeply abusive family, two different family paradigms that were profoundly abusive. And so in my 20s, I was a runner, and I remember saying, it's like my mind is going on a ride. And so, of course, that's meditation. I was meditating. Yeah. And I processed so much. I just processed so much in my physical and energetic bodies, and was really reclusive in a lot of ways, partly because I was in a narcissistic codependent situation, and so my narcissist actually hid me from the world, and I allowed that. And so the running practice did a lot to help me to, as I also phrased it, that I remember saying, compartmentalize my emotional response, so that my emotions didn't own me anymore. I was able to create a gap and observe my emotions rather than reacting from them unconsciously. And then somewhere along my late 20s, there was Wayne Dyer, and there was Deepak Chopra, and there was Eckhart Tolle. And then I'm in my 30s meeting my husband, and he was in a similar kind of practice. By that time, I had become very pragmatic, as I thought. But then I would talk to people, and they're like, you're very mystical, aren't you? And I was like, what? I'm basically a scientist. What do you mean I'm mystical?
I'm not, you are.
Yeah, exactly. But someone had suggested to me that it sounded like I was more of a, what do you call it, like a Jewish mystic, because I have all of this background of that literature, Sure. And I was like, really? That's weird. And so I don't know. Then I remember by the time The Secret came around as a film in 2006. And I was like, what is this thing that everyone's talking about? And I watched it, and it was like, the law of attraction. That's not a secret. That's everything. Deepak's been teaching me that for years. I know what the law of attraction is. And also it was just recalled to me the way it was presented in the film, that Christian dogma. And like, it's not a magic spell that you like, and you like, just have a necklace on. And it kind of disappointed me a little bit that how it was represented, so similar to my Christian background, about how it was representing God or something.
Yeah.
So there's all of that. So that's pre-awakening experience. And then as my life started to just improve, having my partner, and then suddenly I had manifested a career that I was really happy with. And so things in my lifestyle or my life circumstances were more comfortable. And I realized then I was waking up, particularly waking up in the morning, and I would have a feeling that was heavy, and I'd be like, oh, what's that? And I'd feel into it and allow it to become a thought. And it would be something like, I hate my job. And I'd be like, that's weird. I love my job. I'm super excited about what's happening today. So that's strange. And it happened again. It would be something else that just didn't align with my life. And so I thought, that can't be good for my health. What's going on with that? That's strange. Okay, so I had never once in my life even considered going to a psychic. Nothing at all, nothing along the lines of metaphysics, not directly at least, or certainly not in where people are psychic and intuitive readers of any kind. What with the Christianity, and then thinking that I was like super pragmatic scientist. And even in the works of higher consciousness that I was studying, Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle, they don't really talk about that. They're just talking about the higher consciousness aspect of it. So I don't know, on a whim, I thought, maybe I should go see a psychic. Maybe, I don't know, that sounds fun. And I trust myself too. Like before, it would have been like, the fears about, I think, willful skeptics is that your mind is weak and you're going to believe a lie or go crazy or something along those lines. And of course, Crystal talks about it as dominion. And I felt that. I felt that sovereignty in the strength of my mind and my feeling space. And I was like, I don't know, if whatever she tells me is just a silly, fun story, awesome. It'll just be a fun experience. But I thought maybe I should take this to a psychic. Weirdly, I don't know why I thought, like out of the blue, really. And so I went on Yelp and found a psychic, went to her website and liked her energy and looked at her picture of her face and thought I liked it, maybe read a couple of things and thought, oh, she seems cool. And even though it was on Yelp, it was a phone call that we had, a 15-minute phone call. And I had prepared 3 questions, the first of which was, I don't know, I keep waking up and having these feelings that become thoughts, and they just don't make sense to me. Like they don't align with the truth of my life. It's like weird. And she's like, oh, well, you're an empath, right? And to me, she might as well have said, you're a Smurf. I was like, I've heard the word Smurf before. I was like, like Counselor Troy on Star Trek? I don't know what you mean. What are you talking about? And she's like, hold on. Yeah, I'm getting that you're an empath. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she explained, in this space of her saying this sentence or two, empaths are people who experience other people's emotions and thoughts as though they are their own. While she was still saying the words, it was like a moment of claircognizance, I guess now that's what I would call it, because as she was saying it and I wasn't even consciously mapping it, I was bawling. Catharsis. And then so we had our 15-minute phone call, and I was racked and just went online and was searching. And the places where I landed, where it was like very victim oriented, I was like, I'm not made wrong. I just know that I'm not a broken person. So if this is what I am, there must be a right, an accurate, and a healthy way for this to be. And by the way, that psychic, her name is Laura Powers, and we're good friends today. We've collaborated and worked together. It's kind of amazing. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we became friends.
That's really cool that you found her through Yelp, kind of on a whim, talked for 15 minutes, and it created a relationship that's sustained for so long. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I think we started to become, I remember her emailing me afterward and saying, like, listen, you want to take care of yourself the next few days because you just received, even though, like she could tell, she's psychic. And I had like a couple of more appointments with her over like the next year, and then we started to really like become friends. But it is a testament to this work that we do. Like we always want to give, and we think, is it enough? Is it enough? Is it enough? That was a 15-minute session where she told me a piece of information, which to me now seems super basic. You know what I mean? Like it changed my life. So it's a testament to the work. And I guess after that, I did find a coach who her website is thehappysensitive.com, and her name is
Carolyn.
You know her?
I do.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
have you worked with her?
That's so funny. I have. It's been a few years, but I still receive her emails and all of those things. But yeah, it was.
Oh, that's amazing.
Shortly after I learned I was an empath.
She's so great, and her approach.
Yeah, she is.
For me, it was gentle and yet didn't hold back either. And so I worked with Caroline, and it was our actual very last session. So we, she does these emails, and she actually taught me how to meditate, which I didn't know that's what I was doing. She had you connect with your body and do a body scan. And so I was doing that. And then I was like hooked on the exploring, meditation practice. And third eye, obviously opening wide, blowing open. I didn't realize, shifting it to that kind of seeing. And in our very last session, she does this thing, if you've worked with her one-on-one, then you probably know this, Megan, that she has you go through your chakras. And even though I didn't know what a chakra was, she's like, you don't have to know what it is. Just to seat it on the top of your head. It's called your crown, and it's purple in color, like very basic stuff. She's like, you don't need to understand this. Just feel into it and ask it, what do I need to know about, and fill in the blank. Something very open-ended. And I don't even remember what it was at the time. It's like, what do I need to know about my career? What do I need to know about my relationship? Super general. And we just visualize, and I talk through what I'm receiving. And I recommend this practice to people. And I even have a guidance track in a couple of the programs that I offer. And our session was like going overtime. We were in the sacral. And she's like, there's something else we're supposed to be pulling through. And in that sacral, I couldn't get it to, there's all kinds of things coming out. But she's like, there's something more with the session. I'm like, but it's already been an hour and a half. We're overtime. She's like, it doesn't matter. And she's like, let's go in again. What do you see? So I'm feeling into sacral. And I said, I see a little girl in the Easter dress, and she's singing and dancing, and she can talk to animals, and blah, blah, blah. And Caroline stops it. Well, that's it. That's it. You need to uncover your gift of communicating with animals. And I'm like, that's insane. That's wacky. What is no? And no, also. And so I actually, I started our session with Caroline, saying some things that I was concerned about. And one of the things primary thing I was concerned about was this cat who had started to come up onto my back porch every day. I'd known her for about a year, but in the neighborhood, she's a feral. And I had named her Helen. And Helen was coming up on my front porch, like every day, looking me dead on in the eyes from the back windows, and was clearly extremely pregnant, and like looking me in the eyes, like, and
help me.
Help me. And I was like, my husband and I have been discussing, he's like, wait, I don't know, like, are we supposed to intervene in another creature's life and decide they shouldn't have their babies, which is not reflection of his political views, but we're talking about a different species. He's like, we can't ask her what she wants to do. So he thought. And so, that was like at the beginning of the 90-minute session that we were deep into. Cool. But Caroline was like, you need to uncover your gift of animal communication. When we're done, go out there and talk to Helen. And I was like, what? That's insane. Ask her what she wants to do. And so we finished our session, and that's what I did. I went out and I sat, inside, but in front of the window, and Helen was sitting there, like just staring at me with this giant pregnant belly. And I was, all primed from having been in that, visualization and meditation with co-experience, energy healing with Caroline. And so I just somehow naturally knew to reach out with my mind and say to Helen, just reach out to her. And she said to me right away, like, it was a voice, what I describe it as like a literary voice in my mind that is unmistakable. I knew it wasn't me. And she said, I can't have these babies. And I was kind of surprised, because if I had gone in with, if I were going in with bias, I would have been like, I would have made up her saying, I want to have these babies, and it's going to be awesome. Right. And we're going to meet like a cartoon owl, and it's going to be a sweet life with all kinds of babies. And it's an awesome experience to have babies out here in the, streets of Burbank. But she was like, I can't have these babies. And so I outlined for Helen, I was like, okay, so here are your options. I had already trapped, spayed, and released another cat whom I had named Marisol. And so I was like, so I can trap you. Trapping, by the way, if you're not familiar, is a completely humane situation. They actually go inside after food, and then the door closes behind them. I mean, it's scary and traumatic if you trap somebody, but it's physically humane. And trap, neuter, and release, or trap, spay, and release is a very beneficial way to serve the feral community, because we can't possibly bring all of them in and tame them, which is also a traumatic experience when they're adult. But you can do that with any animal, with any cat. Living out in a feral environment is not actually natural to them. They aren't wild animals. They have been biologically conditioned to be domesticated. So a homeless cat is like a homeless person, because we have interfered upon their species. And so actually sterilizing them and then putting them back out there is a way to control the overpopulation, because if you remove a cat from the feral population, then another cat will replace it. And it actually disrupts the balance a little bit. So, you have to be, so the trap neuter. Yeah. So I just thought while we're here, I'd let people know about that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. If you have ferals around, the way you'll know that they are either spayed or neutered is they tip the ear, they give it a little nip. And so you'll see
like a notch.
Yeah. Well, they usually cut the triangle off and make it, and again,
so it has a flat top.
Yeah. So
okay.
Exactly. So if you see a cat who's feral, and you could tell the feral eyes, and of course they wouldn't, make contact with you, and they have that tipped ear, that means that someone has TNR'd them, trapped, neutered, and released them. And so that is actually, you can maybe every now and again adopt a cat from the feral experience and tame them, which is a laborious experience for both of you. But actually replacing them and providing for them is a way to manage the population so that it doesn't get thrown out of balance, and then they replace it with kittens. And you know what I mean? Like, it's an interesting kind of ecosystem that we're managing right now. Okay, anyway, so I'm talking to Helen, and I was like, my very first experience consciously talking to an animal, and I said, so I will trap you, and you'll go to the hospital. And I was explaining to her that she would, then she would go into the anesthesia. When she would wake up, she wouldn't have the babies. She wouldn't have to have babies anymore. And she would be sore, but she would survive it. And I would provide for her and everything. And I was like, and you can live the rest of your life like Marisol, who was this other cat, like I said, who no longer had babies, no longer had to forage because I was feeding them. And Helen's terms came back. I can't have these babies. I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to have babies anymore. And I was like, your second term's non-negotiable, sweetheart. I'm going to keep trying to trap you if I let you have these babies. And so I made an executive decision on her second term, and I trapped her. She actually had been trying to trap her for a year, but she hadn't been homing regularly. So now she was, and she trapped the next day within 45 minutes. I had organized to be able to take her directly into a hospital that would take a feral cat and take care of her and everything. And the doctor told me that a baby was lodged in her birth canal.
So she couldn't.
When she went into labor, she would have died. And obviously all the babies. So she couldn't have the babies. It was literal.
Wow.
And so that was over 5 years ago. And Helen still lives on my back porch with her husband. Not kidding, husband. They are in love, and he's blind now, and she takes care of him, even though she will sometimes mouse even though I have food out there, because it's like she wants to provide for him, so she'll bring him a mouse. And they actually make love. I obviously neutered Tom too, but they actually make love because they had the urge set up, and so even though they don't physically,
it isn't for procreation.
Nope. They had the habit already, but it's for affection, and they actually don't make contact with their genitals even. They're just like making love. It's so funny. It's really kind of sweet and weird.
It sounds like something to see for sure.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time imagining it, but at the same point, it's bringing a very emotional response to me of just joy, and beauty.
It really is precious. And she will go and ask him, he'll be sleeping, and she'll go nudge him and wake him up. And it's like, and they kiss and stuff. Like she's massaging on him and kissing at him. It's a wild thing. It's totally different than their procreative kind of mating, which is really anyways.
To the point.
Yeah, exactly. And they're holding the female and and everything. It's for love. It's kind of funny. And so they're together. Tom and Helen are still together. But after that, it was on. I mean, I was like seeking, and I was like, how do I do this more? How do I become an even healthier empath? And I went to this one class by who is now again my friend and colleague, Hillary Michaels. And some people in the lab have actually worked with her from my recommendation of Hillary, and she's been on my show Charmed Life many times now. And so she's a medium. She mostly teaches mediumship, but I went to a class she was teaching about how to be a healthy empath. And she, so now it'd been a few weeks and I'd been practicing with my friend's animals. Maybe it'd been a month or 6 weeks. And Hillary says to me, I come to class, she's like, okay, so where are you with your, seeking and development or whatever? And I was like, well, I guess I'm like an animal communicator, and I guess I'm like an empath or something, and I don't know. And she was like, did an ability assessment, intuitively or mediumistically read me. And she was like, oh, well, you're a medium. And so at this point, you'd think I'm deep in it, but my beliefs were still shifting around. And I was like, I don't think I believe in that. I don't think I believe that people have a consciousness after they die. And she was like, wait a second, you said you're an animal communicator. You've been practicing animal communication. Yeah, I have. She's like, have you been talking to animals who are on the other side? And I had, and having evidences, you know what I mean? Like my friend's dog telling me something about her physical body and how to take care of it. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, my friend's dog, who's on the other side, I should say. And so she was like, okay, yeah, well, if you could talk to a dead dog, I mean, you could talk to a dead person because you're like a person. That part had escaped me. I'd forgotten. So anyway, yeah. And then I started working with Hillary, opening up mediumship. And again, then it was just on, but I started, I had a couple of oh gosh, I'm trying not to make the story too long, but I spontaneously went live on Facebook once. This was before I knew about Crystal or the Lightworkers Lab. And I went live to give a testimony about some kind of miraculous thing that had happened. First time I ever done Facebook Live. And people on the feed were saying, can I have a reading? You said you're a medium. Can I have a reading? And I was like, oh, I guess. I don't know. How do you give a reading on Facebook Live? And I was like, okay, seeing someone's name on the feed. And I was like, okay, Susan, and I just closed my eyes, took a breath, and started just saying whatever came up. And then I opened my eyes, and Susan's like, I'm crying. That's exactly right. Telling me validation and evidence. Is like, oh, that's weird. I didn't even realize it would work this way. Okay, cool. Who's next? You know what I mean? So some people start to like when we work with people in the intuitive intensive or in the different programs, especially that Crystal and I do, and you're really nervous, like wanting to go live and give readings at first, as you know what I mean? And I was like, Spirit tricked me. I never had that moment of standing on the diving board going, oh, how do I do this? I got tricked into it, and it worked. And so I don't know, I found Crystal at some point, and when I found Crystal's videos, I was like, we're best friends. I know it immediately. We're best friends, and that's how it is. Which I'm sure probably we all have that experience. And then, but I actually so when I got into the lab in November of 2016, that was weirdly the exact same month that I started Charmed Life. It was, I actually, now that I think that they were like, I don't know, they were within a week of one another. But how I started the lab, Crystal only had the lab for her students, the people that were either her current or former students. And I was taking the blueprint. And I started Charmed Life I had kind of started it a few, like 2 months before, doing a beta test of it on Blog Talk Radio. And I didn't like the production quality. But November was when I started it at the studio I'm doing it at now, with what I consider better, high standards of production. And the first episode that I consecutively have not missed a week since then and put out. And so that's a wild synchronicity there. I had no idea that was happening. So I was taking her program, The Blueprint, started in the lab and just poking around and like, wow. And really Facebook groups were kind of new in 16. It seems like kind of crazy. It's only 2.5 years ago, right? Is that right? Yeah. Yes. So that was it. And then, I don't remember you were there at the same time. So somehow we opened it up to the public, and then
I took the Blueprint too.
You did? Was that your first program with her?
Yes. Yep.
Did we have a Facebook group dedicated for it, or was it just the lab? I was trying to remember. I
don't really remember.
Seems so long ago, huh?
I know. I think there was something on Facebook. This program was recommended to me. Crystal was recommended to me from my good friend Julie Ralph, and Julie had been in contact with Crystal for much longer. Had been a part of it before it became an active open group, and so I am a little blurred on how everything. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's really a blur, isn't it? It's kind of amazing because I mean, it's not really. It makes sense as we know how the intuitive life works, because it's really just timeless and formless, because it's all just we remember the love. You know what I mean? Like the details are not, we're not subject to the details. The details are they're the conditions that are just the symptoms of all of the love. So I think that's why we remember the love. So anyway, that's basically how I got in the lab, and then the rest is history. You know, at some point I became a moderator and really did become best friends with Crystal. Here we are.
There you go. Wow, there's a lot in there, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's fascinating because, you know, we've known each other off and on for a while. We've seen each other at the Bliss Retreat. We talked a little bit, but I've never really known your whole story. I think I've heard excerpts of it here and there, but never the whole thing. So thank you. I really appreciate your sharing that. I'm just going to look through my notes because there are some questions that I had. And the one that keeps coming to mind is one you didn't really mention, but you mentioned it, that I talked about in the introduction, and that was the Synchronous meeting with your husband. Do you feel comfortable sharing that?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay.
It's funny, Lauren Olivia and Chris Hoffman just came into town from their neighboring states and hung out with me, and I told them the story, and they were like blown away by it. So I thought... It is really weirdly synchronistic. And at the time, so this was 15 years ago, and we've actually been married for 7 years, but we've been together for 15. We met 15 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah. And I was actually working, I was a manager of a cocktail bar in Montrose, California. I'm just saying that in case you guys do know the geography of Southern California, but I'll explain why it's significant. Montrose, California, and Brian was, he lived in Westlake Village. Now, those cities are about 38 miles apart, which in Los Angeles geography is light years away.
Yeah,
traffic.
Because you have to drive.
Yes, yes. It's a long stretch on the 101. So the town, this Montrose, California, is not even a proper town, and it's tucked away in like the foothills of the San Fernando Valley. It's not like Hollywood at all. And so I was a manager of this bar, and I was single, and I made friends with my cocktail servers, the employees, and one of my friends, the cocktail server, loved going to Agora Hills to dance. And I was not a person I think I'd been to a nightclub as a patron twice. I worked in them and stuff, but it was not my jam at all. I had to wear my earplugs to even be at work. And so my friend Donna was like, yeah, she loved to go. So she was taking me out, and I do love to dance. So, and I love to hang out with my girlfriend. So it was kind of an experiment, doing this. And she, all the way in Agora Hills, which is the neighboring city to Westlake Village, where my now husband lived. And it was this nightclub they had this night where they had a tribute band who did all 70s covers. So how fun is that? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
For the kids now, like the 80s and 90s covers, but I'm old enough that the 70s covers were super fun,
Yep, me too.
Yeah. And so we were going to the nightclub on Thursdays, and it's really far. So it's kind of weird that we would go that far, but it was a unique kind of experience. Hollywood was right over the hill, but Hollywood is a pain in the butt. And so you almost had a Hollywood experience for people in their early 30s at the time. Donna was also the same age. And, without the hassle, you could just drive right up and park. Like, it wasn't like, yeah, Hollywood is like a whole thing. And without some of the energy that's in Hollywood. And so that's what we would do, weirdly. And so Don and I were going there, a couple, 2-3 times a month on Thursdays. And so then I was quitting this job, and it was my very last night at this job. And I don't remember what I was doing next at the time. And so it was my last night. And it was on a Thursday, and Donna's like, come on, the place is empty. You can close early. Just close early. Let's close early. It's 10:45, lock up. We can make it out there. And I'm like, we're going to get there at 11:45. She's like, that's fine. We'll be able to get a couple of dances in. If we get there at midnight, we've got an hour and a half. And I was like, all right, whatever. So she made me get dressed and put on the things, and we went and danced. And that's where I met my husband. So now my husband's side, living 38 miles away in Westlake Village, his close friend, he's actually roommate from college, when, undergrad, which now he's like 10 years out of, or 7, whatever years out of undergrad, actually lived in Southern Orange County, which is another 2 hours away from where I lived. But he actually, his parents lived in Montrose, and that's where he went to high school. So he would come into town to visit his parents, and Brian would come that distance to visit his friend, and then they would meet at my bar, and then they would go to the nightclub that I went to. But here's the thing. This was sort of, I had started to get back into Christianity again, and the denomination that I had been experimenting in was Seventh-day Adventist. And as an Adventist, you actually keep the Sabbath from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. So that was my only time off as the general manager of this bar, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. So wouldn't you know it that Brian and his friend came to my bar on Friday nights. So he was going to, and then going to back to the same nightclub. But of course, I was neither working nor going out to the nightclub, because we went out on Thursdays. So we were going like this for months. And he also similarly didn't go to nightclubs, except that this friend was like, let's go out. And he's like, all right, I'll experiment with going out to nightclubs. And so the very last night, he actually went out on a Thursday on a whim without his friend. He was like, I'm just going to go listen to the music. And he was actually experimenting, talking to people and coming out of his shell. And, and sometimes doing it on his own. And he's a musician. So, it was my last night there. So I was never going to accidentally land at my bar with him, because I was going to go back and hang out at the place I used to work. And I was not going to go out with my girlfriend to this place anymore, because we did it as part of our work relationship.
Right. So
it was like Spirit's last opportunity to throw us together. And it was weird. So he was like, he approached me at the nightclub. My friend was like, there's a cute boy looking at you. And I was like, obviously I know, because I'm ignoring him. This is my move. Ignore the cute boy. That's how I do it. It's junior high. And he came over and he was like, your haircut's cute. And I was like, thank you. And he's like, how old are you? Because I was a person who looked very young. He was like, I do not want to talk to a 21-year-old, because he's 30. He's like, I just don't, I don't relate. I was like, I'm 30. And I just turned 30. And he's like, no, you didn't. And I was like, yeah. And I had my ID, pulled out my ID and showed it to him. And he goes, that's my mom's birthday.
What? Oh my gosh.
My mother-in-law and I have the same birthday. So I was like, whoa, that's weird. And he's like, what do you do? And I was like, well, I just finished a job as a bar manager, but I'm actually in school. I study choral music. And he's like, I have a master's in composition, and my master's was a choral piece. I'm a choral composer. And I'm like, what? I mean, like, how weird, choral music at the nightclub, And then he's like, where do you live? And I said, Montrose. And he's like, oh, there's this really cool bar there. No. And I was like, he's like, I go there all the time with my friend Mark. I'm like, no, you don't. I'm the cute blonde that works there, and I've never seen you. Jokingly. And he's like, yeah, no, there's a cute blonde named Melissa. I'm like, that's my bartender. That's not me. Found out that we were doing this. And my gosh. Really, really weird, really crazy weird. All of the synchronicities were just freaky, a pretty creepy. And I'm not making any of this up.
No, it sounds like it would be a really great foundation for a movie, though. I mean, there is a movie called Serendipity that kind of has them going back and forth like that, but yours sounds better than that story.
Well, it almost sounds, it's like I wouldn't even write that, because it's too on the nose. You know what I mean? It's too silly. But it actually happened.
I love that. Oh, what a cool story. So, I mean, I have a synchronous story with my husband. It's not nearly the same as yours. He's British, and he lives here in Minnesota, and he works in advertising, and he was working at an agency at the time, and there was a woman who was like, hey, they have this thing at this place where we'll get a free, it's like a mixer kind of thing, and we can write a free ad for this local paper that does that. It's called City Pages or something. And so it's a thing that at the back they had all these ads. And so he's like, yeah, fine, all right, we'll go. And so then they made a bet to see who would get more responses and things. And so they're at this place. He's like, it was weird because all the girls banded together, and then I didn't want to go over to that group of women.
Junior high. Junior high again.
Exactly. So he didn't meet anybody there at all. This friend that he went with was platonic, and she was having a great time. So he wrote this ad, they posted it, and before I tell you what it said, I am working at a homeless shelter. It was my first professional level job here in Minnesota, and I am like a human resources manager, and I just wasn't feeling the vibe with the people that I worked with, or the people who utilized the services. That would have been inappropriate anyway, but it's like I wasn't meeting anybody. And so my friend was here, and she had a lot of people in her circle, but none of them were just, nothing was striking a spark. So she's like, hey, why don't you take a look at some of these ads? Or why don't you write an ad? And I'm like, no, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I did start looking at them, and I responded to this one. And what had happened is I only responded to one, and the one I responded to was his. But it was the second print, because the first time he wrote it, he had said blah, 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 blah. And then he put, all you've got to lose is a call, because at the time we had to pay to call.
Yeah.
I mean, pay to listen to their message, and then he could leave a message and stuff. But they misprinted it and said car. So all you've got to lose is a car. And he's like, and nobody responded. And so we finally
I'm going to take your car.
I know. And I'm like, well, I didn't have a car, actually. It wouldn't have bothered me. But they reprinted it for free. And had they not reprinted it for free, I never would have seen it. I never saw the original one. I don't know if I would have answered it or not. I might have thought it was funny. But the second one, it was just walks on beaches, blah, blah, blah. And then he put, it was a pretty decent, nice sounding ad. So I called, and then it took him forever to call me back.
So it took Brian forever to call me too. Like 6 days, but still, it was a long time.
Yeah, well, exactly. See, thank you. I'm going to have him watch this section of the show, because he's like, I was out of town. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that. And I'm like all vulnerable and leaving you this message, and then I get nothing back. And then my roommate's like, hey, the guy left a message, and I'm like, yeah, I don't care. He's like, come on.
It's exactly what I did. Brian and I met that night, and it was such a thing. My girlfriends called me the next morning, and they were like, did he call yet? And I'm like, no, stop it. You know what I mean? Like, they were anticipating it by like 11 a.m. 6 days.
Exactly. I mean, time is different when you have those kind of moments.
Yes.
Right? But then it turns out when we did finally connect, and I think that Julie was my roommate, and she's the one who's like, why not give him another try? Just what's it going to hurt to, just touch base? Thank you, Jules. But we got to talking, and it turns out, so I was in the Navy, and I was in the Middle East for a part of that time. And so was he. He lived there working at an ad agency. And it's very, very possible we crossed paths when we were there. He was married at the time. I don't know that I would have noticed him or he would have noticed me, but we were in the same place at the same time.
Wow.
And
weird.
I think that in part was how it was that we gelled. And then our first date, he took me to an Afghani restaurant and to Volcano, the movie. And I love disaster movies, so there couldn't have been a better movie for him to choose. And he had no idea I liked that. So he's just like, hey, let's go to that movie. And I'm like, okay, that's when I got the whole, how many... And not many guys are going to suggest going to a disaster movie as a first date.
Right.
You just happened to pick the right one.
Amazing.
So, yeah. Wasn't quite as synchronous
as
yours.
Oh my gosh, it so is. Yeah, there's so many.
But it's that same type of, it's like, I mean, if they wouldn't have reprinted it, I never would have met him. There's absolutely no way we would have crossed paths otherwise.
And I just imagine, like, when we're trying to get things right. Here, I think the part of the message here in both of our stories is that we can't miss anything that is meant for us. So if we're trying, what I mean? Like I was like, like I said, I was doing this keep the Sabbath thing. And I shortly after that, around that time, I stopped doing that because it wasn't working for me. That paradigm started to feel dogmatic. So as I was growing out of something like that, and I was sort of missing my opportunity to meet Brian on a Friday, and he was like, whatever, you know what I mean? But we can't miss it. Like there's course correction. The 11th hour, it's going to happen because it was, I hate to say meant to be, but it is. Like our energy was creating it. Our souls were creating it, no matter what. And if it is meant for you, it can't miss you. You can't make a mistake. You're growing. They aren't mistakes. They're growth. It was adding to you. I mean, but you're being attracted to one another. Your energies are finding each other because they just are one already. Because in the timeless space, when we make that bond, it's unconditional, meaning that it's also unconditional to time. So even that's why you found each other or didn't find each other when you're in the same place. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And so all of this,
it would have had very different results if we'd have done that.
The missed opportunities aren't truly missed. Actually, that's if you had gotten together while he was still married, exactly, which people do, because you feel compelled by something. And if if you'd done that, I'm sure it probably would have worked out, because it's meant to have worked out. I shouldn't say probably, it would have worked out, but then maybe there would have been some pain there that you guys had to manage. You know what I mean? The energy still has to be unpacked.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
I'm so
amazing.
glad you said that, because I think at times I have gotten almost paralyzed by that sense of, what am I missing? Like I'm missing things. And so I really appreciate your highlighting that, because that's a thing that, I'm entering a different phase of my life, and a part of it is I've always been reflective, but I'm reflecting differently. And I absolutely have a problem with regret. I don't ever want to feel regret, because I feel like I've made choices that take me on a certain path, and those were the right choices to make. Those were the things that I was supposed to do to get me to this place. So when I start feeling, regret every now and again, which I've never felt before, it's like, wait, where is that even coming from? And then again, you talked about your empath experience, and it's super easy. I've more recently than not been, hanging out in my house, and I don't leave very often. My husband is self-employed as well, so he's here a lot. And now we have our daughter home for the summer and our 2 dogs, and we are in this contained space, coming out of a really long winter of collective energy. And it's like I'm having a hard time discerning between what is mine and what isn't in this. I can do it with other people, but I have a really hard time doing it here. And it's like, is it really my regret? It may not be. I don't know. Now that I think about it. So anyway, there you go.
Well, and the thing is, with regret, any of that bag of emotions, regret, blame, shame, guilt, all of those are all emotions of negating an experience, negating yourself. It's actually creating a division within yourself, because if you're blaming someone, you're actually, you're obviously creating a division between you and them, but it's also a division within yourself, because you are not connecting with your responsibility in whatever's going on in the moment that you have, blamed someone. Regret means that I am denying something that is, and that's not possible. And I always think about it when those start to show up. I had some guilt show up about something about a week ago, but when I've sort of gotten into the conditioning in my energy, that when that starts to show up, similar to you, it's like, oh, okay, that's not a place to stay. It's okay that I'm there now, but it's a place to move on from as quickly. So I almost can just be like, no guilt, no to that.
Yep.
Where is my awareness calling me? That's what's happening, because when we're in that place of disintegrating with ourselves, we're not in our creator energy. We're not in the manifestation process. It's like we're at -1. We're not even at 0 yet. We're not at ground zero yet. And so it's okay. It's any place, perspective, any feeling state to be in is a step toward alignment when we get to alignment. Because again, alignment, or the unconditional loving place, is unconditional. So then, but regret is literally extremely conditional, because you're saying these conditions should not be. And so you're identifying to the conditions, and then you're trying to you're in denial about them. So all of it is just like these layers of being outside of our true creator energy, is the way I see it. So
Oh, well, I love that perspective. I wish I would have heard that 3 weeks ago. But you know what? At the same point, this was when I was able to hear it. So
yes,
thank
exactly.
you for sharing it. See, there, I just went back to that. I wish, blah, blah, blah. It's really interesting how it's showing up for me fairly regularly. So I've made notes on this, because I'm going to put something above my desk to remind me, remember the creator energy. And
well, yeah, I think what the urge there is to pay gratitude. So another along those lines is like, sensitive people, I think we have a bad habit of saying I'm sorry a lot more than we should say I'm sorry. A lot of the times, if you want to stop, and there are times to say I'm sorry, but the distinction is, a lot of the times when we're saying I'm sorry, we actually would do better to say thank you. So I'm sorry I was late. I'm sorry I was late. I'm sorry. And if you didn't do anything like neglectful, you know, maybe something, you just know when you didn't do anything neglectful, you were being responsible and that made you 10 minutes late or something like that, or it's just beyond your control, then rather than saying I'm sorry, which you want to actually honor the person, then if you could say thank you for your patience, thank you for your flexibility, it's actually easier to receive than I'm sorry too, as the person sitting there. Because then the person sitting there is like, oh, they have to take care of you for your I'm sorry, rather than thank you for your patience, thank you for your flexibility. Oh, yeah, you're welcome. You know, that feels good. Thank you feels better than I'm sorry as a receiver. And so, but there are times when you want to say I'm sorry. Sometimes that, rather than it being regret, you want to balance things out. And that's a real energy. So a lot of times, like you were saying, I wish I'd known it. You actually wanted to just celebrate you know, you wanted to feel grateful. You don't actually have any regret, but it's a habit in our speech, I think. But it's a layer that would be good to do well to clean up, because it does adjust our energy. It does drag our energy down a little bit. Now, when you've done something that you feel that the energy's become unbalanced because of something you took more energy, then there's atonement that you can make. And again, you want to honor the person or the field or the whatever. So there's atonement where you actually are attempting to balance the energy, and there's amends. And amends are recognizing the fact that atonement wants to be made. So I honor, and you know, I'm sorry is a part of it. Again, it's honoring the other person. But you have to, for the amends to be real, you have to have already forgiven yourself. Even if I want to atone for this, but I forgive myself. And this is what I'm offering you. I'm honoring the way that things were unbalanced for you because of the actions that I took. You know what I mean? Like, so there's atonement, there's amends, and there's gratitude. That's what I think I'm sorry and regret is actually somewhere along those lines. That's the heightened experience to find in any of those emotions that we tend to feel.
I just absolutely love you, Tricia.
I love you, Megan.
You're so speaking my language. You're talking about words. I love words. I love digging into words and what they mean to us.
Yeah.
And in the Mindset for Lightworkers thing, I was talking about quick shifts you can make, but also just because this is a mindset shift. That part about sorry that you mentioned is something that's been on my mind for a long time, because it could be walking in a store and somebody else is walking in the other direction on the aisle, and people will apologize for being there. And it's like,
I know.
You have every right for being there.
For all of my giving that speech and everything, I still do it. I'll be like, I'm sorry.
I know.
Excuse me.
Like, come on.
Even excuse me is better, because excuse me means like, oh, I'm acknowledging that I'm moving into your space. And I'm just like, you know, just acknowledging that closeness for a moment. That's fine. But, or even again, if you could be like, oh, thank you. You know what I mean? As you pass by, wouldn't that be better?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you for sharing a space with me, which is a long thing to say. You wouldn't say it that way, but.
Thank you for working with me in this very contained aisle that has absolutely no way to fit two people in the same area. But I also really like that self-forgiveness part that you had talked about, and the difference between atonement and amends. That's really cool. But that part about self-forgiveness, I think, is when I see that show, when I've heard apologies from other people for like the example you've given, like, I'm sorry I was late and I did all of this stuff, and then they go into a big explanation.
And that's not appropriate either. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't help. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't really need to know it.
Yeah.
What I'm happy about is that they're there. And usually I'm pretty cool about that, unless I feel like they intentionally delayed themselves, you know, or just didn't feel like letting me know, or, you know, all of those things. And I think the thank you can take care of all of that as well. Just a gratitude. I love that. Super cool. So thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
So I'm curious, you know, I keep thinking about the mediumship and how that really popped up for you. And were you drawn to, was her name Hillary, the person you had mentioned?
Yes, Hillary Michaels.
You went to? Okay. I mean, how were you inspired to go to her? You went to you said a workshop or something?
Yeah, I found her on Meetup. She actually runs a lot of her business on Meetup. So meetup.com, I was just searching on there. I don't remember how I found Meetup, honestly. Probably Googling, how do I friggin' find a place to meet other weirdos like me? And so I learned about Meetup, and I was searching on there, and where she was holding her classes was not too far away. I mean, that was it. I just went,
Wow.
I saw an empath class. I don't remember what she called it, but an empath workshop. I think that's what she calls. She doesn't actually do those anymore because she's like, I don't know how to, I don't feel like teaching empath stuff anymore. I just want to teach mediumship. And because that was years ago now at this point. But yeah, that's how I found her on Meetup, and it was the class. You paid and just went to the class, and there you go. But she, again, like, her passion is teaching mediumship. Yeah.
How did that, I mean, you kind of talked a bit about how you felt about that. That first you didn't really know if you believed in it. And I'm asking from a personal standpoint, and I don't know that you know my hesitancy around mediumship, and I have one.
Oh, no,
And
no, I don't.
I don't understand why. I mean, it shows I can do intuitive readings. I can do things that I think I get a lot of hits, but I don't, I have this strong resistance to mediumship, which is a really interesting thing for me because I'm usually pretty open to anything. And this one in particular is like, whoa. And when in the psychic development circle, we did the thing with missing persons, that one hit me really, really hard in a good way, in a sense, other than the energy seemed to stay with me and I was trying to clear out, and some of it just was residual for a while, but I think it scared me. And so I'm curious if you went through anything like that where you started to, when you delved in even further beyond recognizing, oh, I am doing this. Did you have ups and downs or fears that started to come into play that may have, I don't know, had you like maybe not embrace it to start with?
Well, I should say also, like, so far as mediumship is considered, I actually call myself a multidimensional medium, and actually we're going to be doing an intensive on multidimensional mediumship because I connect. I mean, honestly, connecting with animals, whether they're incarnated or discarnate, that's a mediumistic, because it's connecting with an individual consciousness. Telepathy is is similar to mediumship to me, and so it's just kind of like tuning your frequency to connecting to different individuals. So it's kind of, in a way, for me, not much different than connecting with humans. These are, there's a tier of humans that are no longer physicalizing themselves, and so that's a kind of mediumship we tend to traditionally think of. And mediumship means talking to past loved ones, and it does, but talking to a specific angelic being or nature elemental, that is all kind of a mediumistic tuning to me, just a different dial to be on, if that makes sense.
Yep, and I think you've mentioned that in the intuitive intention as well. The dial especially resonates with me because, and I think that, I mean, I've connected with those as well. And I was going to mention that for me, it's almost like I'm a bug whisperer or something.
Yeah.
So like yesterday, there was a fly on our screen, and we tend not to kill. My daughter doesn't like bugs at all, and we're in a wooded area in springtime where all there are bugs. And not all bugs are friendly because some have been like totally chowing on me lately, but that, I guess that's their way of connecting. but there's this fly, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll get this fly, and I'm trying to get it onto a paper. Instead, it jumped on my thumb, and it's like walking around, and I take it outside, and it goes, and it flies, it lands on my hand, which I'm pretty sure it was a thank you, and then off it went.
That's
and
nice.
I do that. I do that with all kinds of things like moths and just other types of random bugs. I've done it with birds as well in the past. That was years ago. We had an open screen, and one hopped into our living room, and my husband was gone, which I think is good because then it forced me to have to try to get the bird out. Otherwise I might have just said, hey, you do it. Yeah. But I'm like, come on, bird, just, here's the way out. Let's open the door. And I did this, and I kind of directed it. I never had to touch it. I'm like, hey, here's the door. Why don't you go this way? And so then it did. It just walked, it like stopped. It looked at me before it left, and it hopped out. And that was that. I never really thought much about it until we started talking about, animal communications and things like that. And I'm like, am I an elemental? I mean,
that's telepathy.
Only more recently.
Yeah, it's nature communication. It definitely. I mean, I communicate or connect with wild nature, and you can. I mean, I believe, not just I believe. I don't even like to say I believe, but I understand I live in the concept of panpsychism, which is something that I think quantum physics is actually starting to observe, and that is, panpsychism is the concept that absolutely everything is holding consciousness, everything is holding energy, and where there's energy, there's information. So that goes down to the molecular kind of perspective, even the atomic. And it's difficult for us to consciously, like with our conscious mind, map something that is communicating with something that that inside. But that kind of dimensionality is like on the 1D or the 2D, but we absolutely can. And usually then the experience that we do, we in a way, we anthropomorphize it. We create a lens. We allow ourselves to create a story so that we can understand it. But that's not, as long as we're honoring the source still, it's still a real experience. It's a way for us to connect. But we can connect with rocks. Obviously, we talk to crystals and, bodies of water, ecosystems, anything you can put a line around, you can have a real connection with and a communication. And so for you, with the bird, you're like directing your your awareness to the thing that would support the bird, unconditionally without needing anything from it. The bird tapped into that frequency, and yeah, absolutely. So that's communication. That's a kind of telepathy. Absolutely, I think.
Cool.
Oh, but you
I'm
asked
wondering.
Me, sorry, you did
ahead.
ask me though if I had any moments of fearfulness as I got into mediumship. I didn't really answer that, and well, the thing is, by the time I had gotten to that place, I don't know. I just was again in ownership of my energy for the most part. My husband had asked me once, like during this time, he's like, what if you turn down like a metaphysical dark alley and you get into, like, when you're in there doing your thing, what if there's some dark, energy that you happen upon? And I said to him, I was like, honey, I leave this house every day, right? And I'm going wherever I'm going around Los Angeles. And I was like, you don't think when I leave the house, what if I turn down an actual dark alley, right? And he's like, no, I know you know how to stay out of weird areas and how to keep yourself safe. And I'm like, it's just like that, only even easier, because if you make a mistake, you can poof like that, change your energy and not be there anymore. Whereas if I drove down a dark alley, I'm like, oh shit, how do I get out of here? You know what I mean? Like, you got to actually do some physical stuff. But, so it's not really any different. It's actually even easier. And so that was a moment that kind of, even though I was explaining it to my husband, I was like, oh yeah, I actually believe that. It was like spirit actually talking. But I did have a couple of other moments in my growth. I remember one time reading this article, this very fear-based article about, I don't want to speak the fear upon anyone else, but a fear-based article. And I remember just, it like infected me. I mean, I received it. It's my deal. And it was weird because I didn't believe the words, but the energy had gotten into me. And so it was just a moment. It was probably a couple of days of experiencing that. And then it was just, again, another growth opportunity for me to like keep my eye on the prize of being in my sovereignty again and moving past that. And that was kind of it forever. But so far as actually, the only other time I had a sort of negative experience was when I was on this podcast it was called Politics and Psychics. And so the people are just fascinated with psychics. So it's not specifically light work. And I was there doing my thing. And I sort of like felt compelled to read this woman's situation in a way that was like just peering into the psychic realm without a specific healing cause. And I did see an attachment that was creepy, and I was like, whoa, shoot, and I shut it down. And then I was like, okay, note to self, never go in for any reason except for healing. I was going in because I felt like they wanted to see something cool. And so I was going in with the wrong intention, but it was easy. I just shut it down real fast. And again, it was a lesson. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Only go in for love and only seeking love, not something that is like a sort of lustful, you know what I mean? Like an egotistic desire. And I shut it down. Yeah. That's not the only experiences I can recall. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think about, sometimes I go in with a mindset of exploration. And I think sometimes when I do that, then I'm not always ready for what I see. And that may be part of the experience I was talking about. It's like, well, and I think I also went into that experience with the missing persons thing already having some discomfort. Because that's energy I tend not to want to dive into.
Yeah.
And the concept of it itself was like, oh, okay. And it didn't have a happy ending, and I knew it.
I mean, that's okay. We all choose our own work. For someone else, going into that is not a feeling of doing dark work. And because some people think that's dark work. And again, their perspective, and not as to say that people are doing evil things, like the psychic who does that is evil. It's more like you're going into darkness. But for some people, it's not. For some people, it is light work. I'm with you. I don't really enjoy the only kind of missing persons case that I participated on excitedly, or you know what I mean, like enthusiastically, not excited, enthusiastically, was when my actual own cousin was missing. And then all of that dropped away. Gosh. And I was, you know what I mean? Like it was totally light work for me. And that was a happy ending. She was returned and no harm had really come to her. And so I'm with you. I personally, and again, this is not someone else's, I don't like psychic games. Like I don't connect with them when they're doing like, what's this card? I'm like, I don't feel anything. For other people, it's fun and exciting, and they can connect that work to honing their skills so that they can do light work. But for me, I'm just like, I don't feel anything. It's just me.
Well, you know what? That's kind of the same for me. I think there has to be a human aspect for me to connect to it. And so if it's a physical thing without that connection, and it has to be a fairly concrete connection, it doesn't do it for me. But I think you helped me, what you had just said about, when your own cousin was missing, and I'm glad that I'm assuming she came back fine.
Everything fine.
We have had missing persons cases where the outcome is unknown that I automatically go to. There was one around here not all that long ago, and I knew that girl was alive, and she did end up being alive. And it was like, wow, I knew something. I mean, I tapped into that. I got it. I felt like I was sending her some positive energy as well, and some like encouragement that may have helped. And I felt so much better about that. I think for me, it's like when the outcome's unknown, I'm a lot more comfortable with it than when it is, because then I feel like I'm going to a different place.
Interesting.
And so,
got it.
Yeah, thanks for helping me make that distinction.
Sure.
The other thing I just written down was when you were mentioning that with your husband about going down a dark alley, it struck me about street smarts. And I personally always felt like I've had, I have street smarts, and I've had very... this is how, I totally believe in my guardian angel. I was helped in many ways, but I also I recognize that from a physical earth realm, having that street smarts. And I never made the connection between that and energetic street smarts, kind of.
As above, so below. If you
exactly.
It's harder to have something in your physical life that takes a lot more manifestation energy. Right. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's actually, if you can figure that out in the physical, all you have to do is trust yourself that's the only hitch, is trusting yourself. That's it, literally.
I love all you have to do is, it sounds to me like you've done quite well with trusting yourself. Personally, that's a big life journey for me. And so that I love the word just, because it combines like a huge span of effort for some people. Like, you just have to like lift that refrigerator with one hand and clean underneath, and it's easy, right? But I think that trust is such a huge piece, and it's for me, it's been a missing link for a good part of my life. I used to trust myself in a very, in that street smarts kind of way. And I think from an energetic way, it's been harder for me to trust. And I think that it's a full circle kind of thing that I'm coming back to when I was young and out there in nature, talking to frogs and turtles and snakes and bees and things like that without really knowing what I was doing. And now I'm going right back there again. And like, this stuff, I've always believed in these metaphysical experiences, but for a long time I went the very left brain route and like kind of discounted the existence of it within me.
Yeah.
And coming back out there into that trust is a process for me. But I find it really inspiring to talk to you, who sounds like you've done a lot of, you've really led an intuitive life.
I guess.
In the story you told.
And yeah. Well, no, I think so. Well, I think that trust is all about trusting yourself, is recognizing who you are, which is a child of divine. And so when it feels difficult to trust yourself, we have this beautiful experience of being an expression of source energy. So then we can turn, instead of thinking I'm trusting myself, we can turn and say, I trust the universe, I trust God, I trust source energy, whatever that word is for you, for your higher power. Then we get to just put it there. And then that comes back into the center of our being again. It's recognizing who you are. You are that energy. Yeah.
Yes. And remembering that,
Yeah.
which is the big thing for me. It's like I can always tell when I'm disconnected because I start taking it too much into myself and I'm not allowing that larger trust to come through.
Exactly.
And knowing that that happens and how it feels when it happens has been a really helpful thing for me, and hopefully for others. Okay, so I don't know if you realize it, but our time is up.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Oh, we really did. This was a really wonderful conversation. I enjoy talking with you. Hopefully I can have you on the show again sometime. And I just really appreciate your taking the time to come on the show. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Megan. It was really fun. And I appreciate all the work that you do. Thank you so much for the light that you shine on our beautiful world.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for that too, for your light. You have a very wonderful light, and you have these awesome programs that I hope other people will check out. So thank you again. Thanks everyone for watching. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.